I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we dive into the compelling narrative of a very powerful book. It is called Not So Princess Jasmine, Volume 1, from the Bright Light series by Darian Wigfall. This powerful story follows 11-year-old Jasmine as she navigates the challenges of growing up Black in St. Louis amidst the backdrop of a new civil rights movement. Join us right now as we explore Jasmine's struggles with school bullying, the pressures of classical dance, and the harsh realities of living in 2020 America. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Darian, thank you so much for joining us on Spotlight today.
Thank you so much for having me, Logan. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time and I appreciate your insight. Tell us what inspired you to write Not So Princess Jasmine and focus on the experiences of a young Black girl in St. Louis.
Sure. It was actually from my experience being an organizer in the Ferguson uprising after Michael Brown was killed here in St. Louis. I
Mhm.
noticed that the women in leadership were sort of being erased or replaced by men, and those men would typically not give, the credit or whatever benefit that might come with that leadership to the women that started organizations like Action St. Louis or others like that. And so I had already written a book for boys, but I understood myself to be upholding that system of patriarchy, right? And so I wanted to combat that within my own self, and then that kind of led me to write a book for girls as well, because I've mentored young boys and girls, just kind of being a student and then in work and try to just be active in the community. And so, their experience is also near and dear to my heart. So I just wanted to write that experience as well.
Well, great. I think it's an important work. Who's your target audience for the book?
Yeah, sure. So my target audience is children from 10 and up and their parents, because what I've found is that this book and the first one is helping older generations have a tough conversation with younger generations, whether that's a student or their child.
And I think that's important to provoke good, strong conversations, sometimes even uncomfortable conversations to have with your child about the realities of growing up Black in St. Louis and other cities and other regions across America. It's a different experience. And I
Right.
think it's important for it to be explored. Tell us a little bit about Jasmine's relationship with her best friend DeShaun and how his shooting impacts her development and her journey.
Certainly. So DeShaun and Jasmine in the story in this world have grown up together since they were children, but Jasmine moved away. She moved into a part of the county where her parents could send her to a private school. And so they still have a great relationship, talk on the phone on a weekly basis, but when he's shot in his story, it deeply affects her because this is one of her best friends. Even though he's a boy, she goes to him for advice. He goes to her for advice. And when he's all of a sudden basically put down for some time, she is devastated. And so she tries to figure out the things that she can do to support, but it's hard to even put herself in that position because she's never been shot herself. So, it's really hard to comfort a person when you've never been through the experience they're going through. And so she struggles to find a way, but she finds her way to comfort him through
Yeah.
his situation.
And children of that age, of course, should never go through such harrowing experiences. But unfortunately, that is a reality in 2020, 21, and 2021
Right.
and onward, for now at least. Tell us a little bit about the challenges that Jasmine faced in her private school and how these reflect the broader societal issues.
Sure. So in her school situation, I did want to write a an environment where she could learn, but there are also still elements of racism, um, kind of a hangover from parental influence. And so she faces a bully named Jacob Taylor, who also is interacting with DeShaun. So that's kind of the crossover with the stories there. but she's just being teased for being athletic and sort of not fitting in with the typical black stereotype. So when she steps out of those boxes by being a ballet dancer and things like that, people have a problem with that in our society as a whole. But in the book, I write that through the character Jacob Taylor.
Wonderful. It's very effective, no doubt. How do you hope readers will connect with Jasmine's story and the broader message of resilience and empowerment?
I really, really hope readers connect with her story because it seems like themselves. What I try to do is stories that are true to me and true to experiences of people I know, but also include things that are universal so that people can identify with the character, whether they're black or not, and whether they're a woman or not, or a boy or not. So I really hope that they connect with her ability to overcome the obstacles that she's facing in the book, and then to make the tough decisions to not go down routes that might lead her to a worse place.
Absolutely. This is part of a series. Tell us about the Bright Light series.
Excellent. Thank you for asking that
You are.
question. So it was all motivated from an experience that I had mentoring a child that was 13 and then 14 from seventh through eighth grade in a program called Urban Future here in St. Louis. We were at Fanning Middle School down on South Grand, if anybody's ever been to the city. And he was a good kid. He was in a mentoring program, so he was trying to do better for himself. His mom was on him about his grades. She was very in contact with me and his teachers and things like that. But he was struggling because his cousins were starting to drink alcohol, do drugs, have sex, and things like that. And he was starting to get pressure from them. And
Mhm.
so I, in reading the books that we were reading together, and then also my experience working at the Central Public Library here, noticed that in young Black literature, typically the main character is already in trouble. They're in a gang, they're pregnant, they're
Mhm.
doing drugs, whatever the pitfall is. And I didn't see a lot of that story, which is sort of my story. I grew up in the county here in St. Louis, but in any school environment, being one of few Black kids or the majority Black kids, a lot of times white teachers don't give you the most attention.
Mhm.
And so kids that could do better or want to do better sometimes slip through the cracks, even though they're getting passed on, they're not getting the education that they need. And so I really saw that in him and wanted to affect more children that were like him. And for whatever reason, something put it on my spirit to write a book. And so that was in 2012. I was actually working in a lab at that time, but uh my experience with Ferguson and leaving the lab and starting to work in the music and media industry,
Mhm.
I kind of came full circle to coming back around to writing the second book. And so I have 7 to 9 books. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
But I have 7 to 9 books planned, and I want to take DeShaun and Jasmine from sixth grade, roughly fifth grade, sixth grade, through graduating high school, and kind of give a vision of what their dreams might be after that.
Awesome. That sounds great. Evolution of the characters, following them on their journey, the different challenges they might have, the different successes and victories they might have. I think it sounds wonderful. I think it sounds inspiring. Have you envisioned this as perhaps a series of films or a TV series? It could be live action, it could be animated, you know.
I hadn't. I well, I had thought of a cartoon. So I
Yeah.
made a script and then worked with an illustrator or an animator to make a little clip. But somebody recently told me that this could be a movie or TV series just because of all the different characters and all the different stories and kind of the true to life nature of what it is. So I hadn't imagined it before, but I could definitely see it becoming something like that. Something like
Absolutely. Now that the work is out there, you never know where it's going to wind up. You know, somebody from Hulu or Amazon or Netflix could call you and want to turn it into a series. And I think that'd be great because it would reach an even broader audience because not everybody reads, but everybody watches TV, it seems,
very true.
for sure. Tell us a little bit about your experience in Ferguson following the uprising there, I guess I'll call it, you know, over police outrageous conduct.
Yeah.
Are things better? Do you feel like it helped? Tell us a little bit about your thoughts and feelings.
Man, that's such a heavy question, but I think I'll start with my experience there was harrowing. It was so I remember the day that Mike Brown was shot. I was at another event for a group called Freedom Arts and Education Center, and they have a yearly expo. And I was just DJing for different rappers that were performing and singers that were performing, just playing their music. And I remember seeing the reports of what was happening in Ferguson and thinking to myself that it would be similar to Trayvon Martin or somebody like that, where it's in the news cycle for a while, but then it kind of goes away. But later on that night, I was following my Twitter and I saw dogs and tanks in the pictures of some of the people that I knew were at the vigil. And that just struck me as sort of like, what is this, the 1960s or something? I
Right,
didn't
right.
understand what I was seeing. And then that night, the QT was burned. And so the next day, I was there from morning to night every day for about a year and a half. And so we were organizing in a church called Greater St. Mark's. Greater St. Mark's was the name of the church. And it was an experience almost like we were at war. At
Yeah,
night, we would see flashbangs and gas. During the day, it was peaceful. We were walking around, people were giving out water and food and things like that. But excuse me, every evening, the police would kind of cordon us off and say, if you're part of an illegal assembly, you must leave or you will be arrested. And then they would either shoot flashbangs and gas, or they would grab somebody out of the crowd and beat them with sticks. Sometimes they would use, excuse me, sometimes they would use rubber bullets. But all we had was like bottles and food. We didn't come out with weapons or anything like
right,
that.
right. And I'd
Um,
imagine also if you weren't confronted with such heavy artillery, you wouldn't
right,
even have picked up bottles. You would have just had your protests and that would have been it.
exactly,
Let me
exactly.
ask you this. The people, you're there, you're protesting, you're trying to illustrate, a tragedy of a young man's death, yet another young black man's death.
Right.
Um, Does it frustrate you when things get out of control, like the QT burns? Or do you understand that it's out of frustration? Or do you feel like it's some opportunists within the crowd? Or how do you take that? Because I don't see you burning a QT. I see you out there and trying to, get the word across.
Yeah.
And I can see it both ways, that frustration might boil over. I could
Mhm.
see other people just troublemaking kids. It happens in every crowd. So how does it affect you and what do you think about it?
I think in that particular circumstance, it was a situation where the frustration boiled over.
Mm.
A young man, I actually met the young man that lit the trash can that ended up lighting the Quick Trip on fire. Josh, and he was 19. He went to prison for it.
Right.
But um, in that moment, I can see why the frustration, especially so many years. My understanding of St. Louis that we didn't have any riots when MLK was killed. So
Right.
that frustration is still kind of looming over the city. And then
Yeah.
when this happened, it was very much like that incident so long ago. And I think people's memory of that brought out more frustration than was just around Mike Brown. And
Right.
eventually it got better. Well, I wouldn't say it got better. The police stopped beating people as much, and I
Right.
think people were listening to what we were saying more and more. And I believe now that things aren't necessarily better with policing, but the conversation around race is still very much prevalent. I think because of that particular movement, and I think that at the very least, companies are changing policies around diversity,
Yeah.
equity, and inclusion, and at least having the conversation, if nothing else. Whereas 10 years ago, we weren't even having the conversation. So
Exactly.
there
Exactly.
are things that are better. There are things that are sort of the same. So
Very, very interesting. I thought I'd pick your brain since you were there and you were part of the movement. And some of those lessons that you learned, of course, are reflected in this book. It is called Not So Princess Jasmine, Volume 1 from the Bright Light series. It's written by Darian Wigfall. It is a powerful story that follows 11-year-old Jasmine as she navigates the challenges of growing up Black in St. Louis amidst the backdrop of a new civil rights movement. It is important for all children to hear this story of every race, because I think that's the only way we have some unity and we find some answers together. Darian, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate your time, sir. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time until next time on Spotlight.